Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Trainers Lounge. My name is Aaron Cybertron Zhang, and I'm joined by my good friend Markus Statter, and we are here for our second official episode of this brand new VGC podcast. Our first one covered the 2024 World Championships, and we are ready to dive into the brand new format, Regulation H. But before we get started, Markus, man, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I got the new mic. I'm hyped up. I love Regulation H, and I can't wait to start talking about what went down at Baltimore Regionals. Of course, happening just last weekend, and then of course also some of the other online tournaments that we've had. How are you
Yeah,
doing?
I'm good, man. First of all, this podcast so fun. Thank you to everyone who tuned into our very first episode, whether it be on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. It's just really fun to embark on a new adventure here, and it was awesome to see so much positive reception. So Markus and I are super excited to do this consistently for you all, and I'm doing good. I was at Baltimore Regionals, got to commentate, which was really fun. Baltimore is actually pretty close to where I am right now. I'm in New York, and so it should only be like a 2.5 hour train ride. But the journey home yesterday took like
Hmm.
over 6 hours, and I was like literally stuck
Wow.
on a train not moving for 3 hours. And so that could have been a little bit better. I think I ended up getting back to New York at like 3 a.m. when I was supposed to get back at like midnight or just before then. Uh, but yeah,
Oh, but
one way
you,
to start the week.
yeah, do you have trains operating like throughout the night as well?
I think there's like no trains past maybe like midnight, but all the trains were just super, super delayed basically. And so
Hmm.
like, yeah, there was, I think, an accident that had happened and everything just kind of got blocked off,
Yeah,
but there was like no communication from anyone. So everyone was just kind of like sitting in the dark. And I think I was already feeling really tired from commentating. And so I was like, I just want to
yeah,
like
I
get back
bet.
home, get to a bed. But the tournament itself was really fun. I think being able to commentate the first tournament of any season is exciting. And when it's a brand new format, very different from normally, the post Worlds formats where we just played the same format we just had at Worlds.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, in Germany also the trains they stop operating overnight, and I think sometimes it can happen that you're on a train and like the train just like stops somewhere because it's getting too late, and they cannot let like the staff operate like for a certain length of time. It hasn't happened to me, but yeah, fingers crossed. I,
Yeah,
I
it
once
was.
one time, just a very quick story. One time, I was in the UK. Magdalena and I we were visiting Barish and Lou, and we took the train in the wrong direction. So instead of like going 2 hours south, we went 2 hours north, and like there was no way to like get back in time. So then we had to like beg the guy on the train that like they would ride us like would take us back the other way because we didn't want to pay again, obviously.
Yeah.
And then we just had to like Uber for like 45 minutes or something. So yeah, glad you made it home in one
Yeah,
piece.
it was not a easy commute there or back because on the way there, like the train pulled into the station and I was like packing my stuff. And then when I got to the doors were just closed. And I was like,
Oh,
and it was already delayed an hour. So I got in kind of late on Friday. And then the train just pulled away from the station. And I was like, so am I gonna get dragged to Washington, DC right now? But fortunately, the next stop was the airport, which is only like 20 minutes away. So then I was able to just get back home after. But for
oh.
what should be like relatively seamless, you're like, oh, you just got on a train and then you get off. It was a journey, but the tournament itself was very, very fun. So why don't we dive into that?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, I will report back on my train journey to Dortmund regionals in 2 weeks. But now, of course, it's all about Baltimore. So yeah, as you said, tournament, first big tournament of Regulation H. I was really looking forward to this tournament. I don't know how you feel, but like from what I've seen online, I think a lot of people like seem to really enjoy this format. And I was so ready just to see what are people like thinking about the format, what have different groups of builders cooked up, and of course who would win it all. And I would say like we definitely saw some spice, right, throughout the weekend.
A lot of spice. Yeah, there were a lot of things that I didn't have on my radar whatsoever. Wolf had sent me the Galarian Weezing and the Toadscroll team
Yeah.
maybe like a week and a half ago, and my first reaction was like, "Wait, he is cooking!" Like, I think some people probably saw that. He said in the interview, he was like, and my friends were just like, "Dude, are you okay?" But for me, I was like, "Oh, this is classic Wolf. Like, this is vintage,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
2011, 2012, 2013 Wolf." And so, I mean, that was obviously one of the biggest teams that people were talking about over the weekend, but Flamigo, it was on so many
Yep.
of these Porygon 2 Ursaluna teams. That wasn't a Pokemon I had on my radar at all. If you even just look at the top 16 teams, we had offensive Mousehold, Alolan Ninetales, Vivian. Electabuzz has become one of the premier redirection users, which is really cool. Volbeat Espathra was in that top 16. So yeah, similar to you, I was really excited to see what people would bring, and there was a lot of heat.
Yeah, and I think both you and me, like we've spent a little bit of time on the format already, but there's also a couple of Pokemon in there where we are like, oh yeah, like that makes sense. But maybe if for someone who hasn't followed VGC along or isn't so familiar with it, like seeing Electabuzz or even seeing Sneasler, like a Pokemon that
Yeah.
like, was legal for quite a while, but this is like the very first format where we actually get to see it. And then on so many teams, I feel like it's similar for Primarina as well. Which we've seen a little bit like in the Dynamax era, but not so much since then. So yeah, it's just like a lot of Pokemon that I think are kind of cool, but that never really had the format that allowed them to thrive really. And then as well, like those, the ones you mentioned, of course, Volbeat Espathra standing out, and then as well as the Galarian Weezing and Toedscool and Wolf's team. And as well, like Flamigo, like to me is like, oh yeah, like that's a standard Pokemon. And it's like no, that's crazy. It's a Flamigo. Like, how can that be a standard Pokemon? But yeah, here we are. It's Regulation Age.
Yeah, and what I love about these new formats is seeing both the chaos as well as like what are the teams that do end up on top, right? I think Porygon 2 Ursaluna, a lot of people thought would be a very good team composition coming into this tournament, and it performed incredibly well. There were, I think, 4 different ones in the top 8, and most of them were very similar with the Flamigo build. But Dawei, who finished in 3rd place, had this Grimmsnarl plus Volcarona. By the way, I don't know if you watched Dawei's game in top 16, but Dawei played against the Espathra team.
Oh, it was over.
Yeah, I was like, I
yeah.
feel bad for like that's like
Yeah.
probably the worst like counter team you could run into, or the worst lead combo you could run into, or it's like light screen struggle bug, struggle bug, struggle bug. Like I felt
there was
really
no
bad
physical,
like
yeah, there was no physical damage on the Volbeat team at all, right?
Yeah.
Like it was all special attackers, and you go up against like light screen, struggle bug, just couldn't do much against that. But I mean, who knows? Like if the top card shaped out a little bit differently, maybe we would be talking about Espathra Volbeat as the like tournament winner, maybe even.
100%, yeah. Like no team is perfect, and like what are the odds you run into light screen plus a way to decrease your special attack, right? Like
Yeah.
if you look at the other top 16 teams, there's only one other Grimmsnarl even to begin with, right? So that's just
Yeah.
when you make it to top cut, it's a single elimination bracket. If you want to win the whole thing, you've got to get some good matchups. Obviously, play really well, maybe get a little bit of luck as well. But the first thing I want to talk about is the finals. That was one of the craziest finals I've seen. I mean, also because it's Paul Chua, he's like one of the final bosses of VGC. He's looking to get another regional title, and his opponent, the winner of the tournament, Nicholas, this is his very first VGC event, and he played like so calm, collected, like truly like a veteran.
Yep. I think like maybe this is wrong info, but I think I saw on Twitter somewhere someone like saying that it was his second tournament actually. I don't know if he confirmed it in like an interview, but they said that he was playing in like NAIC last year or something. But yeah, even then, like maybe it was his first regional.
First regionals, it might be. Yeah.
Maybe that's what he said. But yeah, like that's incredible. And I mean, when I saw Paul Chua's team, it's like it's so unique. It's got the Alolan Ninetales without Aurora Veil, not something we've ever seen really. And I was thinking when I was seeing this, I was like, oh, like Paul, he cooked something up. Like he knows how to play these teams that like go for the damage trade all the time. And I thought with the Ninetales, he might have like the advantage in the rain matchup as well. But yeah, Nicholas, after losing game 1, he brought the Mousehold, and then like it was over from there.
I kind of commentated. I was like, initially, I was like, I just want to see the Mousehold. And I think Mousehold made a lot of sense. I was thinking more of it just from a defensive or a way to enable the Archaladon, because I was like, oh, Archaladon is such a good win condition. I think one thing that Nicholas did really well was not stick to one win condition in a lot of the sets that he had. For example, in top 4, he first placed towards Basculegion in game 1, and then just drops Basculegion completely and plays towards Archaladon. And then similarly against Paul, he goes towards the Archaladon win con in game 2, Mousehold in game 3. And I think Rain, a lot of people had pegged as one of the top team compositions. It had been doing super well in a lot of the online grassroots events. There was a big Victory Road tournament that one of the best Japanese players won with Rain, right? And so I think Rain itself shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, but this Mousehold honestly was like the hidden piece that I think unlocked the team. And I don't think people were very prepared for it because everyone had been now getting used to defensive Mousehold. But Markus, I remember when Scarlet and Violet first came out, you like won a tournament with Mousehold, and it was offensive Mousehold then. So like it's funny to see it come just like in a full circle.
Yeah, that was like one of the first like in-person tournaments. I think maybe the very first for Scarlet and Violet that we had at the time. The format wasn't. I think it wasn't even like the like official format yet. We were still like on break, but we had this tournament because there was a TCG regional happening, and I thought, oh, like offensive Mousehold, like that's just so much fun. Like you can just like sit there and like just like hope that you would hit, but like it's like playing a lottery, but the lottery is like skewed towards you because it's what, like 99%
Yeah.
to hit, but it like every hit feels so great. So like every time you click it, I think it feels good. And like no matter whether you click it to KO Dragonite or Alolan Ninetales, or if you click it to enable your stamina boosts, like also that whole interaction, like stamina, like population bomb would still be such a strong move if it wasn't for stamina like actually boosting the defense and then reducing the power of each hit. So at first it's like, oh, it's doing quite a bit, but then as you get more hits, then in the end it does like 2 HP or something. So yeah, that was pretty cool, that Nicholas, as you said, like played towards these different kind of tricks and different different like main attackers, I want to say, that the team offered. And yeah, you could play like super offensively Basque Legion Pelipper, as he did, and I think it was top 4. But then it could also be like slow play with Moongus Incineroar. I think he did that in the first game against Paul. And even though he lost that game, I think he also could have won that one. So it's like, definitely well deserved. And I think we will be seeing more of that team, more of Mousehold, because of it just makes so much sense. Like everything just really came together on that team. And I can totally see why he won the tournament with that.
Yeah, if anything, it's actually kind of wild that like no one was using this really beforehand, right? People were always using maybe Pelipper or Chaldon and then Mousehold Annihilate, but it'd be the defensive Mousehold with the beat up
Beat up.
specifically. But
Yep.
I mean, how good, like that finals was literally like a highlight reel for Mousehold. Where in game 2, it's like, oh, I'm here just to make sure let my friend Archaladon has a really good time. And then game 3, Mousehold's like, you know what? It's time for me to take over. I'm going to show what I can do. And I think Paul, ultimately ended up also dropping King Gambit and Incineroar in game 3. Didn't bring either of those into the matchup. And so Mousehold was like, okay, time to just really KO everything.
Yeah, it was, I think, really nicely identified, because then in the second game, because Mousehold was just there to enable the Archaludon, like Paul's mind must have been focused on the Archaludon. Is like, oh, like I just lost against that. Like, what can I do to stop the Archaludon from doing the same thing again to me? And then that's when Nicholas and the mice, when they stroke, and well played. Not only in the finals but throughout the entire tournament. And another regional winner. It would have been Paul's seventh,
Number 7, yeah.
number 7. Wow. So, yeah. I was hoping, of course, for La Decima, the 10th win for Wolf, but not this time.
It was crazy to me that we had Wolf, Riley, and Paul all in the top cut, though, because those are like number 1, number 2, number 3 in terms of most regional titles ever. And,
Yep.
Wolf's pulled away a lot in the last 2 seasons. Him and Paul were tied at 6 at one point, and Wolf just double, or not double, but 1.5x his 6 to a 9, right? And so, but Paul's made it to the finals, and Paul's just one of the most consistent players ever in this game. He is a really old school player. Like I remember him and I competed in nationals and seniors back in top 4 in 2012. And like, he's just like always been so good. And multiple worlds top cuts 2022, top 4 at that tournament as well. So I think there are a lot of things about his team that I liked as well. Like he had a Alolan Ninetales without the Aurorville that we were talking about. And he made Dragonite look so good. I was like, I think in game 1, his Dragonite was like -3, -4 attack, and I was like, oh, I think he's cooked, but he still won.
So much damage. Yeah, I mean, I think like there was one turn where it was like, oh, like it's not gonna do much, but then the Terrablast was actually might have been special, because of all the Intimidate drops.
Oh, that would make sense.
Like I think it was an Incineroar, and I was like, oh, like that's not gonna do like anything, but then it did like, I don't know, like 40%, and then it was like, huh? But then I was like, oh, it must have been special at this point.
Yeah.
So so that definitely came into play. Like I think it's not really an interaction we've seen so much, because Terrablast and Dragonite usually they would have inner focus. So no drops, no Intimidate at least. But Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned 2012 because Paul's team actually reminded me a little bit of like how Pokemon was played. Like maybe not 2012, but maybe like 2014. Like I used to love like Amoonguss, Garchomp, and like Mawile, which is a little bit similar to King Gambit in terms of typing, or like Salamence, which is like the Dragonite. So I felt really at home like watching Paul play with that team.
Yeah, it's that team in particular reminded me. I think it was 2012 Nationals. There was a Japanese team. I'd actually given Brendan this team to use, and it had like Gyarados instead of King Gambit. It was Bisharp. I think Garchomp was on it. I think there may have been a Tyranitar as well. But either way, I was like, this feels so similar to the team that Paul ended
Was
up
this
bringing.
2013
Oh yeah, I think it's
with the
2013. Yeah,
Choice Band Gyarados?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that was Shadow Head,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
yeah, that's it. It was crazy because that was actually the team I got eliminated from top 16 at nationals that year too. And like I knew everything
Mm,
about it, which back in the day in VGC gave you such a big advantage, but still it lost and the team was just like really strong.
yep.
But yeah, like I thought I had the exact same thought when I just saw like Garchomp, Amoonguss, and King Gambit because I was like, oh, this just used to be a Bisharp basically. And then
Yes,
like
yes.
yeah, the Dragonite feels very similar to like how hard the Gyarados used to hit.
Yeah, shout out to Arash Omadi, world champion that year, who brought that team to 2, maybe 3 nationals in Europe.
Yeah,
So
it was a really cool team.
yeah, looking a little bit like further down the list of like teams, I think like Flamigo is one thing we mentioned, but it's like the only team that is repeated in the top 8. It's that Amoonguss, Incineroar, Porygon, Ursaluna, Goldango, and then while some Italian players like Marco Silva and Fede Campo, they had used this with Assault Vest Tyranitar to do pretty well in one of the Victory Road tournaments. Now, yeah, Toller and Chris bringing the Flamigo. I think it's another one of those like superstar Pokemon that would be nowhere like near the top 8 in any other regulation. But now, because of this like specific rule set, like all of a sudden Flamigo is like a top threat.
Yeah, in my opinion, like the two archetypes you definitely have to look to beat coming out of this tournament are Rain and this Porygon 2 Ursaluna comp, right?
Yeah.
I think Rain, there's a little bit of flexibility, right? Some people run Salamence or King Gambit instead of like the Mouse Hold, for example. But Pelipper Child in itself just so strong. Basculegion looked really good for Nicholas as well. I think him opting to run like Mystic Water rather than Choice Band was really smart as well. Like the
Yep.
flexibility to protect and switch moves is really valuable. But yeah, to your point, I think Flamigo, first of all, what a cool call. Like I think that was just
Yep.
really brilliant because that wasn't a Pokemon that I had heard many people even talking about, but it makes so much sense. You know, Scrappy, just such a good ability. Wide Guard, such a good move as well. And this team was really represented in the tournament, right? We had Toller and Christopher who had the exact same six. We had Junxi who had the Tyranitar version that you just called out as well.
Yep.
And so like 3 in the top 8 with another, slightly derivative Porygon 2 Ursaluna team. Like this is the duo to beat right now, in my opinion. And Rain is still really good as well, obviously, but I think this Porygon 2 Ursaluna composition is just so scary.
Yeah, and then I think there were like at least 3 or 4 more in day 2 at like 8-3.
Yeah.
Like I was looking at the teams to like talk to Wolf a little bit, or to just see what he would be going up the next day, and I was like, wow, like so many Flamigos, like what happened there? But there was this one game, I think it was Toller Web against Riley in top 16.
Yeah.
And the Flamigo went like CC on an Incineroar, Brave Bird like one shot, because you don't get intimidated because of Scrappy. The next turn it went for Brave Bird on a Rillaboom, one shot, and then Goldango was like the last for Riley. I think then like Trick Room was up and the Flamigo went down, but yeah, with CC you also threaten a one-hit KO on Goldango. So like having a single Pokemon that threatens like all 3 of those, like I think it might be like literally the only Pokemon that can do it in such a way.
Yeah, 100%. I remember Rose and I, when we were on the desk, like we're talking about Flamigo, and then they showed like the top 12 Pokemon, and I was like, wait,
Yeah.
low key, Flamigo hits like 9 of these 12, 10 of these 12 for super effective damage. Like, what the heck?
Yeah.
That in itself is just so crazy. So this is what I love about VGC, right? Because it's like, okay, if this tournament didn't happen, when would people actually figure out, hey, Flamigo's really good? But when so many people do well with this one Pokemon alone, and on a team composition that's already been really well respected, I think this is easily one of the top teams to respect now. And so I think, yeah, very cool find. Great job by that entire team building group to identify that it would be really powerful. And even though it didn't end up winning the entire tournament, the fact that so many different versions of this comp, like May top 8, means that there's obviously something really strong going on here.
Yeah. Yeah, then of course we could go on, I think, for ages, like so many strong players, good teams. But one thing I definitely wanted to talk to you about was like the tournament structure, because this
Yeah.
was the very first tournament that we have with this new like X2 advances, but then the day two, it has like limited Swiss rounds, so they only played 3 rounds of Swiss, right? And then we're moving into this asymmetrical cut, meaning that everyone who has the same record as the 8th seed would make it to the single elimination bracket. Yeah, I was talking to some people how it's like a little bit weird to follow along in terms of like storylines, I guess, because like last round of Swiss, day one, like what do you want to see? Do you want to see like win and in, or do you want to like see Wolf with a crazy team? Probably Wolf in this case, but like as day two has like way fewer rounds now, it feels like um it's like the spotlight is definitely on those players who are leaving day one with like an XO or X1 score, right? And if you're at X2, like sure you get a play on day two, but you need to go like 3-0, and that's like gonna be so tough, right?
Yeah, totally. I think it's first of all, I haven't played in the new tournament structure. I mean, obviously outside of Worlds, I think I prefer it just because fewer rounds means I think less variance overall. I think cutting down the time for the tournament as well for players. I think in the old structure you can go 7-2 on day one, and you'd probably need to go 4-1 on day two, maybe even
Yeah,
5-0 to move on, right? And so if you lose that first game, you're like, well, I'm still here, like playing another 4 rounds, which isn't bad, right? It's fun to just play Pokemon, but it's a little demoralizing when you feel like you've basically
yeah,
been eliminated from top 8, but like you still have so many rounds left to play. Um, so I think it's good from like a tournament organization perspective. I think, yeah, one of the things to think about as we move forward is, yeah, what match do you stream in the final round of the day? I
yeah,
think that's something that still there is debate about. You can make an argument for both, but to your point, I think prioritizing an X1 match or an XO match even like those are the players you will very likely end up seeing in top 16 or top cut in general versus an X2 match. Like even if it is a great match, like the odds of those players then making it into top cut are like obviously not impossible, but like you said, like a very difficult task. There's merit to
yeah.
both. I think the way I see it is that this is just one really long Swiss tournament now. I guess the thing is, like, is that much different from previously? I don't know, but to me, it's like, yeah, I think because there are also fewer rounds in day two. If you're doing a high record on day one, then like they maybe have to only go 2-1 or even 1-2 on day two to move on to top cut.
Yeah.
So you can start building up their storylines and narratives a little bit earlier. The asymmetrical top cut was also interesting. Basically, what ended up happening is it's like some of the top 16 games are actually already decided, right?
Yeah.
Whereas some people have to play in for a spot into the top 16. So they would actually kind of run that simultaneously, which is why the stream, for example, didn't feature like a top 32 game into a top 16 game. It was more like, oh, whatever top 16 games are available, let's just get them going right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I
Huh.
think the idea behind that is to just like obviously minimize the amount of time it takes between
Yeah.
rounds and try to just like get the games going as quickly as possible. So I don't know. I think I didn't mind the structure. I think I was a little confused by the top cut bracket at first because I was like, oh, like how can you start top 16 before the top 32 like playing
Yeah.
games are even done?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I also just prefer a tournament with like generally fewer rounds than more because it's just so like mentally exhausting. Especially if your goal is to like try to win the whole thing, right? Like even just cutting out 2 rounds of like really mentally exhausting games can be helpful. But I'm curious what your perspective is.
Yeah, no, I think like my main or like the main benefit that I see we're getting from the structure is the fact that now resistance is not deciding anymore, like who
Yeah.
makes it to top cut and who doesn't. I think that was like a big problem of the old structure. Because we would have situations where like the same score would be in top 8, but they would also be outside of top 16. And I think it's like the same thing happened for TCG now with this new structure. So that's kind of weird because of course like I don't know how exactly the numbers work for TCG, but of course they have ties, so like some math is just different. But I think they had the same situation where now they had like people on the bubble for like top cut, and like if they like lost the last round, like if they won they would be in top cut, but if they lost they would be like way out of like, I don't know if they were out of prices, but like maybe they were like, yeah, out of top 16 or something, top 32. So actually, I think some people there, like, they can intentionally draw, which is a little bit, anticlimactic in like a win and in situation, because they just wanted to like settle for like some points. So I think maybe there is still needs to be a little bit more refinement, but I think it's definitely like a step in the right direction. As you say, I think the asymmetrical top cut is a little bit confusing. I don't think we had like a graphic for that,
Yeah,
for like the whole bracket. So then I also saw like some people were confused, like, oh, which round is this, and like who is still in. But I think, yeah, like it's definitely like a step in the right direction, and I think the logistics and everything like will follow. We'll understand it better as we go. Basically, is my take here. I think.
totally. Yeah. And the resistance thing is a big deal. Like it really was crazy. Like you would have, someone, I think it happened at EUIC to your point where it was like maybe seventh, eighth seed were like X2, X3 record,
Yeah.
and then like 20th place was also X3. And like the gap in pricing between like top 8 versus top 32 is just absolutely huge, right? So
Yeah.
um yeah, I always thought like resistance felt really bad in Pokemon in general because like you just really can't control obviously who you play. And for those that are listening that maybe don't know what it is exactly, basically the way tiebreakers were determined in Pokemon and seeding is based on how your opponents did, right? So if you played against a lot of opponents that won a lot of games, that's really good for you. But if you played like your first couple of opponents, maybe they only play, they win 2 out of the 8 games, that basically negatively counts against you. So the idea is we should reward people with higher strength, like schedules or stronger schedules, essentially. But it just felt really bad because like so much of that is outside of your control, especially the first couple of rounds, like rounds 1, rounds 2, rounds 3. That feels like really tough. And then with this whole like day 2 structure as well, resistance was just like for the problem was surrounded, I think, just like further increased essentially. And so to your point, yeah, it like feels more fair now, right? Where it's like, oh, okay, I know I can only lose 2 games, and if I lose more than that, then I'm out. It is interesting. Because I assume now, like for regionals, like you have to go X2 or better in order to make top cut, which is what it was
Yeah.
basically like back in the day. Whereas in the kind of 14 round regionals that we were having, you could go X3 and still make the top
Yeah.
8. Like in Vancouver, when I got top 4, I think I went 8-1, lost the first 2 games of the second day, but then won the last 3 and still managed to make it into top 8. But that's because the attendance numbers was smaller, right? So it's like you get rewarded for a smaller tournament there. Whereas now in this new structure, it's like it doesn't matter. Actually, well, to your point, I think it might matter how many people are in it if it's like really high based on
Yeah.
TCG. But for where VG numbers are, it seems like it is a pretty good structure.
Yep. Yeah, I think like 9-2 and 11-3, like those are comparable results, like in terms of how difficult it is to get them, I guess. Yeah, I don't want to talk too much about resistance, but like I'm still not over the fact that for whatever reason they only included, like on the day 2 tournaments, they only included your opponents and how they did on the second day in the
Yeah.
resistance. So like it was just like a mess in my opinion, but we're over that. We don't have to spend so much time thinking about how it was being calculated and who was like treated unfairly because of it or whatever. But now it's in your own hands. Like that's, I think, what people like to see. Like, exactly, well, not exactly because it's like, oh, whatever like 8th seed will have, like that's what you need to get as the record. But I think it was pretty clear that it was going to be 9-2. So then it's like, oh, okay, I need to like win at least 6 games on the first day, and then my final record needs to be 9-2. Like that's easy to explain to anyone. Yeah, I can't wait to play in that format in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it'll be exciting. I think one of the things that I'm curious is where the metagame shifts now in 2 weeks,
Yes.
relative to where we are now. So, what are your kind of big meta takeaways from this tournament?
Yeah, so I think you pointed it out. So I think from Baltimore we learned that like Rain is like still very much up there and still like very powerful. It wasn't featured on a lot of teams. I think there was another one in top 16.
Yep, just
Yeah,
only one
maybe.
other one in 11th place, and this one had the mouse hold plus the annihilate, and this was the like defensive mouse hold.
Yeah,
It was very similar to that team that won one of the big online grassroots tournaments to start the season. It just has
yes, the very
Grimmsnarl roll
first one.
over
Yeah, I
Incineroar.
remember that.
Yeah,
Yeah, so like Rain, even though it's not like, and I think that's just a testament to how strong it is, because even though the usage isn't very high, like the peaks are very high. So of course it won the tournament, but then it had one more in top 16, another one in 17th place, so just right outside of there. And I think it's just like so powerful. Like now that we're slowly but steadily like untangling how you can set up like your strongest attackers. I think it was a debate. Like you have Archelodon and you have Basque Legion, but then you could also do like Annihilate and like beat up things. But now I think this version from Nicholas, you have the Mousehold as like another like powerful attacker, and I think that's definitely something that I think people will try to copy and to adapt. Then the other one, as you mentioned, is those like bulky, balancy Porygon 2 teams. Usually they come with an Ursaluna, just because that's like, think Ursaluna. Ursaluna is one of those Pokemon like that does not feel like 2014 or 2012. It's
Yeah.
like so strong. That's just on another level, just in terms of like raw strength. So if you can set it up in the right spot, then yeah, it can just be like game over from there. And then I think the third team, we didn't actually see that much of it because there was no Rillaboom in the top 8 of this tournament.
Mm-hmm.
But just right outside of it, like the team that, for example, Justin Tang used, the team that Riley used looks a little bit like what I'm thinking about, but it's just like King Gambit, Redirection. It can be either Clefable or Electabuzz, and then you have like a Rillaboom usually. You could have like a Sneasler, Primarina, maybe a Volcarona, maybe a Salamence or Dragapult, like those type of teams. I think there's like maybe 10 Pokemon that are used pretty commonly together in those teams, and I think that's an archetype that is pretty big in Europe right now.
Mm.
I know that a lot of like strong Italian players are using it. Some Germans are using it, and I think that's maybe a little bit underrepresented here in the top, just relative to how strong I think it is. But that would be like the third like strong team that I see at the moment in the metagame.
Yeah, there are a bunch of different things that I want to talk about hearing that. The first thing is the difference between like the North American and the European metagames. Because I
Yes.
feel like people are always like, oh, North Americans, like, they can really build crazy stuff, but the Europeans are stronger players overall and like to use like more standard Pokemon. And I think I saw a tweet earlier today that was like, oh, it's so funny seeing like North American players like Reg H so much because here in Europe, we want to go back to, we want our Urshifu back, you know, we want our Raging Bolts back. So I'm curious how you feel about the differences between EU and NA.
Yeah, I'm definitely not at that camp. Like, I definitely like playing without Urshifu for once. I think there will be many, many more years of VGC, and Urshifu will always be relevant. So, I'm not mad that we get to go back to a format where it's not present. To me personally, like the whole like EU, NA, and even Japan, like sometimes like debate or LATAM. Like I feel like, well, we're playing the same game, and I feel like at the end of the day, it like the same stuff like might be strong no matter like where you are on this planet. Of course, like the meta game can be like a little bit different. I think one extreme example was like last year, the Bologna special event, where it felt like in NAIC, like no one was really considering Calyrex Shadow Rider, but then in Bologna in Italy, like everyone had this Clefairy Calyrex Shadow Rider team. So there are definitely some like local influences, I would say. But in the grand scheme of things, like especially now that we have so many online tournaments as well, in addition to the circuit on site, I feel like there's a lot of opportunities for players to play against teams that maybe are not so present in their local scene, but then they would want to consider then in their team building, because like it's so easy for anyone to hop on the ladder and just like find a team they like, and you wouldn't know like from who you're taking it, right? So if you're seeing a team and you're weak to it, like I wouldn't be like, oh, that's a team that only like, I don't know, NA players use, so I'm not like caring about it. So I think that's kind of what I think. But then again, maybe there is some like regional differences, and maybe the top players like they know how to adapt to those. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious to see it like in terms of creativity or like really crazy picks. Like we saw some absolutely wild stuff day 2 of this tournament. We had like Hypno is probably the wildest thing to me. Like
Yeah.
so, you know,
And
that's
this
just
is, I think this is like someone just like in their builder is like, okay, like what learns like Imprison, like Trick Room, and Expanding Force. I don't even remember what the last move was,
it
but
was
like,
Haze, so it was like
oh,
no
Haze. Yeah.
NDD side
Yeah, yeah,
spam
yeah.
and
Exactly.
no Dondozo.
Exactly. Yeah. They had like two matchups that they worried about. Like, or I don't know, maybe Hypno is also doing something that I fail to understand. But if that's the only Pokemon that offers both of those things, then like it's the right pick for the team. Like that's just how it is.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I think it's so awesome to see. Yeah, I'm curious, like in EU following the first couple of regionals you guys have, like how many crazy picks like that will come up versus ones like more standard teams like the Dragapult, Electabuzz, King Gambit stuff, as
Yep,
well as
yep.
the Porygon 2 stuff. One thing I wanted to pick your brain about was Dondozo. You know, I thought Dondozo was
Oh,
so good in Scarlet and Violet VGC
hmm.
in the beginning. I mean, it even top 8 worlds. There was one, of course, in top 8. And a lot of notable players who were very good with Dondozo in early Scarlet and Violet still brought it. You know, Chopper Cross being one of the big ones, finishing in 26th place, using a Dondozo team that basically was legal in it was what Series 1. That's
Yep.
yeah, before it was called even regulations. And so
Yeah, I think he had like maybe he had Stellar Terra on the Palmot. Like that's maybe like the one thing. Or like Meteor Beam. Yeah, that was
yeah,
yeah,
Media Beam Glimora, that's right. Yeah.
yeah, both of those. So like slight adaptations, but like tiny, of course, in the whole like scale of things. Um but sorry to cut you off. You were going to ask me about how I feel about it, or
Yeah, I guess I definitely pegged it as a good archetype coming into this. And in the end,
yeah.
it's not like it underperformed completely, right? It did get top 8. But I'm curious, like, where you think Dondozo will go in particular, because I think it's something that you still definitely have to respect in team building. To me, I think so many Amoonguses running Clear Smog alone, and Amoongus being such a good Pokemon right now, makes
Yep.
it, I think, a lot harder for Dondozo to just easily thrive.
Yeah, so when you were talking about like creative Pokemon coming out from EU, I was just hovering over. So that was in parallel to the Baltimore Regionals. There was also a Victory Road challenge going on. So like big online tournament. Of course, hardly any like players from NA were participating in that one. But we had a couple of people from both like Italy and Japan. Well, I say Italy because like they're they finished like first, second, fifth, sixth, 10th, 11th. I'm sure like other nations from Europe played as well, but Italy just like crushed at this tournament. And I think the single like most creative Pokemon I'm seeing here in this top cut was a Dondozo. But it was like it won the tournament, but with a covered cloak set and no Tatsugiri. So just like defensive, like yawn, maybe some fissures here and there. Like, yeah, that's the most creative Pokemon I'm seeing here. So yeah, I think Europe definitely likes like the yeah more solid teams. But then back on the topic of Dondozo with Tatsugiri, I think it's one of those teams where like because it was available in other formats as well, because like we kind of already know what some of the like strongest Dondozo teams might look like. I think it had like a big target on its back, because like going into this tournament, like you could probably know that you would play against at least one Dondozo just because of how strong it was, and because they're like, if anyone asked me like, "Hey, I don't have a team. Like, what should I do?" I mean, maybe I wouldn't have told them to use Dondozo, but that would have been like on my list for sure in terms of
Totally.
like teams that like you can maybe just pick up and like it's just so strong. But then at the same time, there might be like players who have like very elaborate game plans because it's so refined already. You can kind of know like which Pokemon to expect. And there were actually also some other variants of Dondozo that I saw in some online tournaments where it was like they had like Alolan Ninetales and they would set up like Aurora Veil. Or they would have like Arcaludon or Miascorada, like some Pokemon that maybe just like throw off your general plan. Like I'm gonna like use haste with my Primarina. Like maybe against those Pokemon, it's not that easy to pull it off or to get Primarina in position. So like yeah, I think Dondozo still has like room for creativity. Um, but like just after this tournament, I'm not like super hyped about it, is what I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. I wonder if there's going to be a move towards something like Steel Terra Dondozo, which was an adaptation we had seen before to get around Clear Smog Amoonguss. So it's like you say, okay, you can put me to sleep, but it's fine because at least you can't get rid of my boosts. So I don't know. It's definitely an archetype I'm still interested by, and it feels like the ones that the Dondozo teams we saw in this tournament hadn't really like taken that extra step to innovate and utilize like all the new tools that we had access to. But I think it's still an archetype that you absolutely have to respect. And there's a reason why Clear Smog Amoonguss and just like Amoonguss without Protect is so common right now.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, dude, I could talk about like Regulation H or like these tournaments forever. But one more thing I wanted to ask you. So obviously you weren't playing in this tournament, so you were commentating. Um, and I just wanted to ask, like, I don't know, how was the experience for you as a caster? Like, how does it feel like starting the new season? How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, it was really fun. I think first I was like, whoa, it's weird because like I haven't gone to that many events. Like Worlds was the last event, and I was in like full player mode for that one, and I hadn't been in full player mode in so long. And then the last event before that, I was like, oh, I guess it was Indianapolis Regionals where I casted with Wolf, and that was obviously such a fun time.
Yeah.
Um, I think I treat commentating like playing, right? Where it's like I want to do the best job possible, and I always aim to like hopefully provide like both education and entertainment. Um, and I was like, I probably like walked away with the weekend being like, that was fun. I think I could have done better, like especially for how good the finals was. I was like, like I messed up on a couple of mechanics, and that's the tough thing about a new regulation. I think it's like you're just seeing your point about like the Terror Blast from Dragonite onto Incineroar. Like
Yeah.
I was very confused that how I was doing so much, and like that explanation makes sense. But in the moment, I was like, wait, what? And I think a lot of like mechanics in VGC is like you see it once, and then if you remember it for like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
rest of your life, basically. But if you haven't seen it before, or it's been so long since you've seen it, especially shifting from this like previous regulation, I think it's just something where like it takes a little bit of time to like get up to speed, whether you're a caster or a player. Um, but I think I love casting in general. I think casting a tournament when it's like new Pokemon and teams that like you don't really know what to expect is like really fun. I feel like for me, I could cast like any match and it would be fun just because I love talking about high level Pokemon and like
Yeah.
watching good players play Pokemon is awesome. But yeah, I think I was like okay with my performance. Like I was like definitely made more mistakes than usual. I don't like making any mistakes, and I think like there were moments that I could have like hyped up better or some analysis that I could have done better. But overall, it was like obviously a blast, and like it is really fun to do it with Rosemary, who is someone I've been working with for a very long time, and like the finals in particular, like that's a match that you never will forget, and so
Yeah.
really good experience, and it was cool to like start off the new season in such a fun format. Like I feel like if you told me, okay, the first tournament we're not going to go to Reg H, like we're just playing Reg G, I'd be like, well, okay, it's like exciting-ish, but like how much of this is stuff that we haven't seen before? How different will it be from other things? But here we're really just getting completely new format with crazy Pokemon and picks.
Yeah. But like then again, like there's like some niche mechanics that, yeah, as you say, like sometimes you see them once and then you would know them. But then there's also like wheezing and toad squirrel mechanics where
Yep.
I'm still trying to like understand, like, okay, so if the wheezing switches in and out, like when does what happen? Because it's like different for like toad squirrel versus like prankster and like some other abilities. So yeah, I think it's totally natural that unless you've like spent like a good like chunk of time on a particular team like that, I think it's like totally fine to, yeah, like get a couple of things or like not understanding them initially, but then after like it happens, you would like recognize it. So it's like, I think, yeah, that's the learning experience. And as a player, you go through that on your own. But then, of
Exactly.
course,
Yeah.
like if you're like up there on stage, then you're like, oh, dang, like I wish I had put more time in like playing with this team. But there's so many teams in this regulation, so yeah, hard to like know them all.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I can actually remember I think all the things that caught me off guard. Like I had literally just forgotten that like you can't redirect coaching, which feels so unintuitive because like
Yes,
decorate was
yes,
we saw decorate Smeargle so much in Reg G, and so it's like you can
right.
actually redirect that away. But coaching and I think Dragon Shear is the only other move that works this way, where like you can't even target right like the opposing
Yeah,
side, and so as a result it can't be redirected. And like I think it was like in the second game I cast that I had talked about that.
yeah.
And then sometimes it's like even just remembering base powers. Like I think in the finals I was like, oh, he went for Blizzard, but like
Was that or with freeze
freeze dry,
dry?
yeah. And then
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but then I'm like, oh wait. And then in the moment I was like, wait, I think actually in my head I was like, freeze dry is probably actually weaker, but I wasn't
yeah.
100% sure on that. And it's like that's something that feels unintuitive because it's like you would think a single target move of a
Yes,
typing would be
might be
stronger than
stronger.
the spread move,
Because
right?
why would you use it if it was weaker? Like why would? But yeah,
Right.
of course, freeze dry has a very like unique mechanic on its own, which is like very rare for offensive moves. Like
Yeah.
yeah, you're totally right. It's like stomping tantrum versus earthquake. Like you wouldn't need to think twice about like which one's stronger on a single target.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. I think that's what makes casting so interesting, where it's like I think these are things that now that I've all seen once, it's like, okay, surely I will remember in the future. But I think for me, I always like evaluate after I cast like on a couple of different metrics. It's like, okay, like did I make any like just blatant mistakes? Do I think I did a good job like with the analysis? Like, was I able to spot really cool plays like before they were even made? And there were some that I was like really happy I called out, like Self Willows, for example,
Nice.
to
Yeah.
prevent sleep. Like that felt cool. Was it entertaining? Like, do I think I worked well with my partner? Like all these different things. And so I think, it's first event of the season. I'm just getting back into it. So it was like definitely not a perfect performance, but it's like playing, right? You like learn from these things and you just keep improving. But yeah, I mean, I love casting. So I treat each of these like really seriously and try to just like keep learning from them to figure out how I can be the best caster possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure a lot of our audience appreciate that, and a lot more people who are probably not listening to us. So yeah, thank you. It definitely made my viewing experience a lot more pleasant.
Yeah, super, super fun experience. And I think it's cool to just see how the audience responds to it as well. I think one of the moments that I remember really from this tournament was like population bomb. You had the headphones on, you could still
Yeah,
hear
yeah,
the
yeah,
crowd like literally counting like 1, 2, 3, and I was like playing around
yeah.
with it, and I thought that was super fun.
I'm gonna say it, like, sometimes with the audio setup, like, as a caster, you're not quite sure, like, will the, like, mic pick up the audience or not?
Yeah.
Like, I think you were, like, explaining, like, you could hear the audience, like, a little bit chanting, like, 1 hit, like, 2, 3, and you were like, "Oh, the audience is cheering as well," and then you, like, started, like, counting with them, but then sometimes as a caster, I also wouldn't know, like, can the audience hear me?
Yeah.
Like, so you don't know, like, do the viewers, like, hear the audience, and then does the audience hear me? But I think it was, like, really fun, and definitely, like, also Nicholas, like, watching it back, I think he will, like, have such a blast. Of course he won, but then also, like, he created that, like, unique moment, I think, that I think, like, people will, like, remember for quite a while. Like, I saw some of the memes already, and I don't think it's going anywhere because, yeah, Mousehold too strong.
100%. Yeah. I want to shift our focus a little bit. We on Twitter, if you don't follow us, by the way, give us a follow. It is at Trainers Lounge, trainers_lounge, and we are going to be active there, especially as a way to drive engagement and with you all and ask questions. So I tweeted after the tournament was over. Baltimore
Oh,
was quite the way to
let's
start the
do a
season.
full socials reel while
Yeah.
we're on it, and then let's do it again at the end of the podcast, because I had someone who was like, "Oh, like, yeah, I watched, like, the podcast, but can you please also, like, put it on Spotify? Like, that would be easier for me." And I'm like, "Hey, dude, like, it's already there. Like, maybe we didn't advertise this enough, but hey, if you're listening on Spotify, it's also on YouTube, and if you're listening on YouTube, it's also on Spotify." So I don't know. Can you follow someone on Spotify?
You can, yeah. I think,
You
or you can
can.
save the show, yeah. So if you're listening on Spotify, iTunes, we should be on the other podcasting platforms as well. But if there's one that we're not on that you want us to be on, just shoot us a message on Twitter, or if you're watching this on YouTube, comment. Happy to get it onto every single platform that you listen to your favorite podcasts on. But we're on all of them. Give us a review, leave a comment there. We really want to make this as accessible as possible, no matter where you're listening from.
Nice. Well, and now back to the action.
And yeah, follow us on Twitter because we will be tweeting and asking you all questions, and we want to make this collaborative with all of you. So let's take
Aaron has been tweeting so far, but I will join soon.
all right, so let's just go through these questions. I'll try to get through as many as we can.
Yeah, I think we covered a couple of them
Yeah.
when, like, they were like a couple. I think I saw about just, like, Baltimore, like some of the metagame. But yeah, if you have one up on screen, or, like, if you can see it, then
So we got this one. What makes Porygon 2 the best Trick Room setter with Ursaluna? Would using a different Trick Room setter like Farigiraf or Indeedee be that bad?
yeah, I think we talked about Porygon 2, like, a little bit, but yeah, I think it is so strong because of Eviolite, and because of how, like, I think it's because it has, like, Trick Room, and is so bulky with Eviolite and Recover, so it can stay on the field for a while. But then it also is this offensive Pokemon all of a sudden because of the unique, like, interaction with, like, Download and Terra Blast. So that's another one of those, like, cool mechanics, I guess. So Terra Blast, again, as we learned with the Dragonite example, it uses whichever stat is higher between attack and special attack if you are terrestrialized. So if you're getting a download attack boost, usually they would be bad on Porygon, but all of a sudden, if you terrestrialize and go for Terra Blast, then you can have a Pokemon that hits on the physical side very hard and also hits hard on the special side. It would have, like, 150-ish, like, stat in both attack and special attack, and that's like considering the boost, and that's, like, pretty strong. So yeah, I think that would be my answer probably. And all of the other Trick Room setters, like maybe Farigiraf is also can be quite strong, but, like, all of the others, they're just, like, only support, but Porygon can do both. That would probably be my answer.
Yeah, and I think Terra Blast as an attack is awesome on Porygon specifically because you don't need to Terra to
Right.
actually get
Yep.
value out of it. Whereas like it feels like kind of an odd move for most Pokemon if you're not Terraing. So
Yes.
I don't think the others are unviable, but Porygon is just so good. And I think being able to heal yourself when you also can do so much damage is no joke, right? There's a reason why we see Recover so frequently on it. So just a combination of being an offensive Pokemon that can also set up Trick Room, deal damage, unique interactions with Terra Blast, and download is what I'd say. This question says, which oddball mons that saw success do you think will have the best chance of finding consistency?
Do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, I guess it's like we talked a lot about Flamigo. Flamigo does feel like a pretty oddball mon to me, and in my opinion, that's like an actual real threat to respect coming out of this tournament. Mousehold isn't an oddball mon at all, but like it winning just as a reminder, hey, offensive Mousehold is actually something you need to respect because I think basically no one was actually using it very much, and so those are I think the two immediate answers I would say. But yeah, Flamigo I just like didn't see coming into this tournament at all, and I think it's something that you should definitely see a lot more of into the future. There were a couple Delphoxes as well that I think are no joke on these hyper offense teams with NDD as well, where you just set up Psychic Terrain. It's just another really strong expanding force user. So those are some of my immediate answers that jump to mind.
Okay, yeah, you said the exact same three Pokemon that I was gonna say. I was like, you said like Flamigo. I was like, okay, then I can say what was the other one?
Mousehold and Delphox.
Mousehold. Yeah. Then I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I do Mousehold now, and then I was like, okay, it's gonna be Delphox. I think Typhlosion, like Wolf used it, and it was also on the Volbeat team.
Yep.
If you're a Volbeat fan, I don't think we will see that many Volbeats after this. Maybe a little bit more than before, but I think there's still like strong competition in the field of prankster support Pokemon. Another Pokemon that I don't think we got to see it a lot, but I thought it was kind of clever was Breloom
Yeah.
on Nick Navarre's team. Like having like fast access to sleep move. Also the Vivillon, I think is like in the same category on Z's team that made it to the top 8. Like having fast sleep is pretty powerful against those like slower paced teams. Like the Porygon 2, for example, is like a prime target. It cannot have safety goggles. You will always put it to sleep. And then there's just a bunch of like Pokemon that cannot outspeed those like fast and frail Focus Sash sleep mons. So I don't know how much we will see of them. I mean, Toadscruel, I guess, is another one that falls into this category. But yeah, having sleep available like is just such a powerful condition.
Yeah.
Or you just go for Dire Claw, like that works too.
Sneasler is something that I thought actually kind of underperformed in this tournament relative. Like, I
Mhm.
think it's a really good Pokemon and its usage rate was quite high. So if you told me Sneasler wins a tournament later on in this regulation, I definitely wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, definitely agree with all of those. And I'm glad you called out Nick's team because I think Tailwind Hyper Offense was actually a little bit underrepresented in this tournament.
Yep.
And Nick was using that. He had Talonflame to set up Tailwind, Hisuian Specs Typhlosion, Life Orb Garchomp, Assault Vest Hydreigon, Breloom, and King Gambit. So I really like this version of Hyper Offense. I think there's just so much power here. One interesting or two interesting trends, even just that I see from this team, by the way. It feels like Clear Amulet Garchomp, people realize that's not a real item. Like, let's just use Life Orb. It's still so strong.
Yeah.
And then King Gambit, also a huge Pokemon in this tournament. We're moving away from just like the double dark type attack, Swords Dance variants that people were using. And it feels like low kick is now a lot more common on these sets to deal with Incineroar. Incineroar, by the way, now carrying Flare Blitz so much more frequently as well.
Yep.
Also, in the last podcast, I was like, Incineroar is a fraud. It turns out I am the fraud because I think Incineroar was on like, what, 5 of the teams in top 8, maybe even more.
75, 6 out of 8, I think. Yeah.
And I think we saw it a lot actually when Nicholas played with it, where it's like, I also think his decision to just run Flare Blitz when you have Pelipper, like, it's not like necessarily the most intuitive thing, right? Even though Flare
Yep.
Blitz is such a strong attack, and he was very good at like piloting it to like say, okay, I'm gonna use Flare Blitz when the rain isn't up. But yeah, it turns out Incineroar is still really good, especially because I think for the longest time people have been used to it as a more support-oriented Pokemon in Reg G. But now just throwing Flare Blitz back onto it, getting rid of like Taunt or Helping Hand or the other moves that people were using on it, like it still does so much damage, right? When like Golden is one of the most common Pokemon, and you can just Flare Blitz and knock off onto it, it's really strong.
Yeah, I think people need to understand again that, as you were saying, like Flare Blitz, 120 base power move, like knockoff, what is it, 97.5? Like, and then those are stab as well. And Incineroar has a good attack stat. It's like 110, I think. Something like that, attack base. It's like it's pretty powerful. So yeah, like it is a support Pokemon, but it's also an offensive Pokemon. That is what makes it like one of the best Pokemon in VGC ever. So yeah, I don't know if this trend will carry over to Europe, where I think the next regionals will happen in 2 weeks in Dortmund. Just because I think there, like, King Gambit is a little bit more common,
Yeah.
and also just like I think just like the whole like Primarina, like just a couple of Pokemon that Incineroar doesn't like face too much. So yeah, I wonder how it's gonna shape out though.
Yeah, we actually got a
Um,
question about Instant saying, would love some discussion about Instant taking up 75% of top 8 while
yeah,
Rilla took up 0%, and how the social dynamics around Incineroar can impact its performance. The last couple of weeks have been really interesting regarding perceptions of Instant in this format.
yeah, I think it's like if you ask Wolf, he would probably say, "Oh, it's the same thing every time." Like people are like, "No, no, I don't want to use Instant," but then, Instant is the coach. You gotta use it, or maybe he would say something like that. So, so it's like it is so strong as a Pokemon, and even though there is like we've got Clear Amulet, we've got Covered Cloak. Like as you pointed out, like people are not even using Clear Amulet anymore on some of the physical attackers, just because it's like, yeah, it's good against Instant, but it's only good against Instant. And sometimes the opponent doesn't have Instant, or even if they have, they don't bring it. So it's like, yes, it's like these are some items that like specifically shut down Instant, but they don't shut down all of its toolkit, and they just shut down Instant. And Instant is never like the key on any team. It's always like a Pokemon that you can bring as like, I don't know, like the third or fourth Pokemon in preview that you're thinking that you want to bring. So yeah, I think there could definitely be tournaments where it's not as high usage, but like you want to have something against like Hard Trick Room, Size Spam, like Instant offers that as well. You want to have an Amoonguss answer, throw on Safety Goggles. Instant is good against that too. So it's just like a role compression thing too, I think, where it just covers so many different bases in just like one slot.
Yeah, I think one thing that's also interesting is people's perceptions of a format when you're only playing like online ladder best of one versus like open team sheet best of three, right? Like I think
Yeah.
Incineroar is just such a glue of a Pokemon where open team sheet best of three like can have a lot more success because it has so many tools that you just mentioned. Whereas in like the more volatile best of one format, like it can be a little bit less effective because you'll run into so many random covert cloaks, for example, right? You can literally lose a game on like I played against covert cloak Pelipper. I click fake out into it, covert
Mm,
cloak survives weather ball, my instant faints. Boom, right?
yeah.
So I think
GG.
I was definitely being a little over dramatic when I was like, I don't love instant, but at the same time, I think it's because I'd only been playing closed team sheet best of one. And like in that format, there are so many things that reward you for using things that can just like counter things like Incineroar. In open team sheet, you're just not going to get caught off guard by those, or you at least know about your opponent's covert cloaks and whatnot. So yeah, I think it'll stick around. I think Rillaboom people have been like, well, this Pokemon is a fraud. It wasn't in top 8 at all, but its usage was still so high. I think it's a couple of things for me personally. Like there are a lot of the teams in the top 8, like Rillaboom looked like it had a really bad matchup into, right? Like teams that the winning team, Archaladon, Incinemungus, Pelipper, right? Paul's team, Incinemungus, you've got Golden Go. And I specifically think if you want to look at how Rillaboom can hold you back, if you watch Justin Tang versus Christopher Hahn's game, there was I think it was game 3 where Rillaboom was just out on the field and it like couldn't do anything basically. It was like, oh, I can't like do any damage because I'm staring down at Amoonguss, but I also don't want to switch out because if I like U-turn out, Amoonguss can just spore me, right? So I think like Amoonguss and instant usage and Golden Go usage all being as high as it is, and Rillaboom not being able to do anything against those, and those Pokemon being able to like put in pressure against you, right? If you turn out, well, you can get knocked off. If you switch out against a Golden Goat, they can nasty plot in front of you. If Amoonguss is in front of the field, they can spore you, right? So because there are some other really good Pokemon that Rillaboom has like very bad matchup into, it already makes it tougher. And then unlike other regulations, like I felt like in Reg G, Rillaboom was actually really good offensively. And that's not to say it isn't in this format, but when you could hit Calyrex Shadow Rider for so much
Yeah.
damage, when you threaten like Kyogre for so much damage, that's a really big deal. Here, I think it's just like there are a lot more defensive things that like can take a wood hammer, for example, and suddenly then Rillaboom doesn't become as scary as an offensive threat.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it only has one offensive typing. Like it will only ever really use grass type attacks. So like, yeah, if the opponent has like Amoonguss, Incin, Flamigo, Goldengo, then yeah, sometimes you just cannot do so much. But okay, you want to see a magic trick, okay?
Yes.
So you're looking Do you have the standings open at the moment? So you're
From
looking at
Baltimore.
you're looking at the top 8. Okay,
Yep.
no Rillaboom, okay?
Yep.
Okay, just like scroll down and keep
Uh-huh.
scrolling. Keep scrolling. It's like, oh, where are all the Rillaboom? Where are they hiding? Like, where are
Uh-huh.
they? Just keep scrolling, keep scrolling, keep scrolling
Yeah.
until you reach the end of day 2, which is 86 to
80.
92nd place.
Yep.
You're there?
Uh-huh.
Like, all of those teams have Rillaboom on there.
Rillaboom, 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 Rillaboom,
Yeah,
Rillaboom,
maybe
Rillaboom.
that's where they are. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe yeah, it was just bad luck. Like anything can happen. Like making day 2 at a tournament like this is already like a big achievement. But yeah, I think some of the Rillabooms didn't have such a good day in day 2. But yeah, it could have gone differently. And maybe we'll see some more Rillaboom in Dortmund. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah, my take is it's still a really good Pokemon, but it can be a liability more frequently now in this format because of the amount of things that threaten it offensively and the number of Pokemon that can take advantage of it being on the field. Like, the Golden Goal that I mentioned earlier setting up in front of you, right? So,
Yep.
and Rillaboom inherently has a very bad matchup into Incineroar, and, we just talked about Incineroar as well. So don't expect this Pokemon to go anywhere. Like, I'd be shocked if it dropped, like, usage significantly. I think it's still really good and fits onto a lot of teams, but it not making it into the top 8 makes some sense, especially when you look at the other teams in day 2, right? Because like there's just so many things that Rillaboom struggles against. And yeah, I think once again, if you want to see it become a liability, you should watch that stream game from day 1 of Christopher Hahn against Justin Tang. But
okay, yeah, you want to do one more question?
One more question, let's do it.
One more question,
Is
because
there anyone that sticks out to you?
I saw a good friend, Billa,
Yeah.
tweeting at us asking about Ursaluna Bloodmoon. Because, yeah, that's another one of those Pokemon where I think going into the format, like, I will admit it. At some point, I was thinking, like, is Ursaluna Bloodmoon going to be, like, S tier in this format?
Yeah.
Because this was, like, first or second day of the format, and there were these, like, hyper-offensive Tailwind teams with, like, Whimsicott, Ursaluna Bloodmoon, and then you would have, like, I don't know, our Caludon with the Power Herb Sturdy set, and like it just doesn't have any like counters. I mean, sure, there's like Bronzong, I guess, with Levitate, but other than that, like you just hit like almost everything, and so like Blood Moon feels like a restricted as well, just like the regular Ursaluna. But in this tournament, I mean, there was one in the top cut.
Let's see. I think
Yeah,
the highest placing looks like 21st place. Yeah.
21st. It's like, yeah, where is it going? Where is it? Because I actually don't think it has that bad of a matchup, I guess, into some of the teams. But then again, if you just like look at them, maybe people are like figured out where to put the assault vest, like how to, I guess, like set up Trick Room against these teams. Because yeah, we had this trend where Blood Moon was all of a sudden going at like max speed.
Yeah.
And outspeeding like Rillaboom sometimes, even if you're like timid on the Blood Moon. But yeah, didn't really perform.
To me, it feels like a lot of top players opted not to use it. So I always think like, okay, just because a Pokemon didn't do super well at a tournament, is that because like, did a lot of like people who I would consider as favorites to win the event bring it and still underperform with it? Or is it that it just like wasn't picked very much, right? Because if it's the latter, which I would say is more the case for this tournament, it makes me then think, well, maybe it's just people like the top players decided I just don't like it as much right now. Like regular Ursaluna, had such a good performance. So I feel like it was underrepresented in this tournament. I don't think it's just like completely out of the meta. And, we saw it obviously one in top cut and then a couple of others just at 8-3. There were 4 other players who had Ursaluna Bloodmoon at 8-3.
Yep.
So certainly still, I think, a very viable Pokemon. I think, yeah, it just seems like people were maybe not as excited to use it relative to like regular Ursaluna. I think part of it is figuring out how to use Blood Moon as well. Do you want to use it on a Tailwind team with max speed, like you mentioned, which is what felt like a lot of people had started up to doing? Or do you want to use it with Trick Room, right? I think more people have been favoring like the Tailwind builds, but going back to like a bulkier build, I think certainly could have some value. And yeah, maybe part of the reason was because like Focus Sash, really good item, right? Like Flamigo, for example. Well, that thing can just close combat your Ursaluna Bloodmoon, and it can wide guard against you as well. And Flamigo having such a good performance also makes it tougher for Ursaluna to just thrive. Like I think Ursaluna really loves to just like pick up one hit knockouts with Blood Moon, or like, finish things off as it gets like a spread hyper voice off. So my take is that like a lot of top players just decided not to bring it into this event. And I think that like under the hands of a really good player, I could totally still see it winning a tournament. It's just like it was like a little underrepresented in terms of people bringing it here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one more thing that I would just want to give a quick shout out to is I've seen people start running Unburden on their Sneasler, so that even like if you get down to Focus Sash, like with Unburden, all of a sudden you can like outpace Ursaluna. So I think people are still like respecting it enough. But yeah, there might be a point in time where it's like once in a blood moon, like it's gonna come out of the shadows and just like wanted KO everything.
Yeah, I don't think it's something people should disrespect. It just seems like for this tournament, people are like, well, it's not the Pokemon that I necessarily want to lean on the most, right? But it was still in the top cut ultimately. I think so many players finishing A3, including Jejong, who of course was a regional champion in Milwaukee a couple of years ago. He was using the King Gambit with Electabuzz. I mean, his team is cool. King Gambit, Electabuzz, Rillaboom, Sneasler, Ursaluna Bloodmoon, and Chandelure. And so, yeah, like this is not a Tailwind team, right? Ursaluna here could potentially operate under Trick Room when being set up by Chandelure. So don't disrespect this Pokemon. Like I think that is something where just because it didn't have the best performances here doesn't mean that it's like out of the meta whatsoever. And I think the classic cycle with Pokemon is people being like, well, okay, no one's using this Pokemon anymore. Now let me think, why is no one using this? Is it just because people are under appreciating it? And so like, I could see people now going back to the builder and being like, well, no one's respecting this anymore. So now I can take advantage of that. So yeah, I expect it to still be around.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too. All right. Want to move on to the next segment?
Let's do it.
Well, there's a lot of like more Pokemon we could talk about. Like there's the Grand Challenge coming up. We haven't talked about those, but go sign up. I guess by the time this comes out, signups might be over. But yeah, anyway, I think they run until the 19th, September 19th.
That sounds right, yeah.
I need to sign up because you need to sign up and submit the team at the same time, right?
Yes. Which is annoying because back in the day with these tournaments, you could like start the tournament and then lock your team in after.
Yes, very annoying. So I still need to build a team, but I have some ideas. I mean, you're the best of one expert, right? I should be asking you.
I don't know. It's these tournaments do have more weight to them now, so I'm like, oh, like each one counts. But there are also a ton of them, so like it's like missing one doesn't feel terrible.
Yeah, but not instant is what you're saying, right? Like I'll write that down. Take notes, everyone.
I think if you are using this, just be careful because you're gonna run into a ton of random Cobra cloaks. That's the one in this format. I think I'm really scared of playing in these challenges, so I'm looking to use something that will maybe scare my opponents even more than they scare me. But it's going to be a challenging structure for sure.
Yeah, that's my plan as well. Just like, maybe how's Toadscroll Wheezing positioned in the anyway. So yeah, go have fun playing in that over the weekend. Are you gonna play?
I think it's going to be one of those where I'll like play a few games every few hours here and there instead of like sitting down and dedicating time to it because I'm traveling over the weekend. But it's like, oh, if I'm at the airport, maybe I'll play an hour, or like at nighttime, for example.
Yep.
Fun fact, actually, fun story. When I was on spring break last year, I was in Sri Lanka with my friends, and this was in April or March, right before EUIC. And at that point, I was really close to qualifying for Worlds, and I was like, oh, okay, in the off chance I don't get like any points from EUIC, like I should still play this, right? Because like I don't have that many opportunities for events left because I wasn't going to go to any more regionals. So it was like I basically played, I think, like 20 games all in one night. Like me and my friends had stopped hanging out. It was like, okay, 11 p.m. And I like just go to my room. I turn on my Switch and I'm just playing like the global challenge until like 4 or 5 a.m. And I was like, that was miserable, but I think I should get like 20 CP. So I'll take it.
Yes.
And then, dude, I would not recommend that. I was just like,
I remember that. But then did you like, could you celebrate with friends like the day after, or was this like after your like trip was over?
Well, it was like I didn't qualify for Worlds off that alone. Like I still needed the EUIC points, but I did this as like just in case I get no points from EUIC. So I didn't even get to celebrate. It was more like, oh great, I stayed up and ruined my sleep for 20 championship points. Like,
well, I mean, I've like done worse for less. So Uh, all right. Yeah, I think for me, like I will be at a wedding on Friday, and then I have something planned on Saturday. So I might just like pick up a team that just like finishes games quickly and just play on Sunday. Like just sit down. And as you say, like maybe after 10 games, I'm like, okay, whatever. Like this team like is not it. Then I'll just stop playing. But I think that's maybe like my best strategy for this one.
The worst is when you lock in your team and then you play like the first game and you're like, this was not it. I have made a
Yeah.
terrible decision. Why did I
Yeah, or
lock
you
this
have like
team in?
one wrong item, or you forgot to like ability patch something, and then you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, if you're
It's tough.
playing, make sure you double check everything. Just you
Yep.
don't want to make any mistakes. I think I did make a mistake one time where maybe I think I just had no EVs on something, and I was like, oh,
Mm,
well that's not good. It might have been like a
yeah.
Choice Scarf, Final Gambit, Annihilate, which is like one of the worst Pokemon I have no EVs on.
Or you
So,
had like attack EVs instead of HP or
yeah,
something.
something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Oh no. um, well, I think I want to introduce a new segment on
Let's
the
do it.
podcast. Okay, are you ready for it?
I'm ready. And for those listening, I have no idea what this is.
Yeah,
Marcus
this
said
is
right
okay.
before
So
we
this is
started.
this is fully improvised, and
Okay.
not only did Aaron not know about this, I didn't know about this because I just came up. So I got this new microphone. I hope you can hear it. I still need to figure things out, but I got this new microphone, but I did not get the professional like microphone arm yet. So it's like just like chilling here in front of me on a couple of books, and I stood up and went grab some books off the shelf, and I wanted some that are like sturdy, and so it's not like I don't know, like that it doesn't fall over basically. And as I grab these books, I see this one book, and I'm like, okay, I gotta bring this to the podcast because even though some of you, of course, are listening to this audio only, but I'm sure Aaron will describe what he sees in a second as I'm showing this to him. And my idea was maybe we can take turns bringing like significant, I guess, items. Like it could be anything, like from
Ooh.
throughout the years, and just like give a little bit of a backstory. Okay, so I brought a book. I'll tell you this much, and I will hold it up in the camera, and then I would want you to just describe what you see.
It is a book with Japanese text on the first 2/3, upper half, and then the bottom 1/3 is a picture of Shoma Honami, the 2015 world champion and national champion from Japan that year, aka
Yep.
Vieira. And this is a book he wrote and published about Pokemon.
Yes, he did. And I ask him like not every time I see him, but like at Worlds, like I brought this up that this exists to someone, and they were like, "Oh, how much did he sell?" And so I asked Vera about it, and I don't remember the number, but he said like, "Oh yeah, like it's crazy that he could like sell a book." And I think he was doing this like mostly for himself because this talks about like his competitive journey as a player from starting in uh 2010, I think. Yeah, 2010 was the first year he played. And then like he kept playing and playing, and then of course eventually, famously, he became world champion in 2015. And I got it with a little like signature of him, and I just saw it on the shelf, and I thought it would be fun to bring along. So, yeah, that's gonna be my item of the week.
That's so cool.
And I think he was talking about how he like this book it's just like tournament reports. Like he's talking about, okay, like at this like spring tournament in 2010, like I brought this team, and then there would be a picture of the whole team and attacks, and then he would explain like why he chose this team and so on. And it's like it's a book. I mean, I can't read it unfortunately, but I wanted to have it to add to my collection. So I think it might still sell on Amazon or something. I don't think we have an affiliate link or anything, but if you can read Japanese and you can like type it, then maybe you want to read Shoma Honami talk about his Pokemon journey.
Shoma, by the way, is an absolute legend. Obviously, world champion in 2015. He was, I think, always like one of those players that was like so good in Japan, but hadn't actually qualified for Worlds because it's so difficult through the
Yep.
qualification system. And then in 2015 he wins Worlds, but he also won Japanese Nationals. I think he might have finished first place on like the online qualifier as well. And he was
Yes.
like kind
Yeah.
of the one of the main piloters of course Chalk, which all of Japan like kind of brought to the World Championships that year. A team with Cresselia, Heatran, Amoonguss, Landers, Kangaskhan. But Yoshoma is like one of the biggest content creators. He commentates tournaments as well. He's like very, very fully involved in VGC still, a decade later. So seeing that brings back memories. And I think one of the funniest stories from Worlds 2015, there was like a Japanese player and he was like, I'm not going to go to Worlds because I am confident Shoba Honami will win the tournament. And Markus and I were
Yes.
talking about like, we mentioned this in the first episode. We're like, oh, back in the day, like Seijo winning Worlds, Shoba winning Worlds, Wolf winning Worlds. Like you almost could feel that coming. And like, I remember seeing that tweet and I was like, okay, that's come on. Like, there's so many good players at Worlds, really. And then he wins the whole thing. And
Yep.
he beat Sage and Park. He was actually 4-2 back then. Like most of the times you could only get one loss and make it to top 8. But that year at Worlds, I think him and maybe one other player at X2 had made it through. So he was at 4-2, beat Sejong, but his opponents in the earlier rounds were so strong, like on resistance, he still ended up making top 8, which was wild. And then I think he beat Naoto in top 4, and Naoto obviously went to win Worlds a few years later as well. And so yeah, that was definitely one of the most fascinating seasons because he like stuck with the same team composition and just kept iterating on it over and over again, from best of 1 online play to best of 3 closed team sheet back in the day. But it's so cool seeing that book because I was always like,
Yeah.
we had published it, but I don't think I've ever seen like an actual copy of it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure in the book you could read about how at Japan Nationals in 2015 he had Charizard, Mega Charizard Y as the last Pokemon. Then for Worlds, of course, he had the Thunderous. So even within Chalk, and I could also talk about this forever, there were like a lot of variations and cool things. So yeah, shout out to Shoma. Even though we cannot really like communicate that well, I think, because he doesn't know German, I don't know Japanese. We both try in English, but yeah, it's always fun seeing him and the other players that he hangs out with at Worlds every year.
That is such a cool first item. I'm excited to show off mine next week. I don't know what I'll bring yet, but it'll be spicy.
I have some things lined up. Like
Yeah.
I just came up with this, but I have another one like I could grab like right now, but it'll take a couple of episodes until we get to that one because that one's very special.
I think yeah, this is a fun way to just show like all the random stuff we've accumulated throughout the years playing the game and what like the old items and memorabilia look like as well. So yeah, I think very fun new segment, Markus. So thank you for introducing it.
Oh, I hope you're like a how do you say, like a hoarder as I am.
Oh yeah.
Like I hope you didn't like throw out all the stuff from the old days, because I have like boxes upon boxes of like things like that. Well, maybe
It's so
not as cool, but yeah.
it's so funny because I got a DM earlier today and it was from Alberto Lara, who's like a very high level competitor, and he also like sells a lot of merchandise. And he was like, "Oh, your brother Brendan told me that you guys had a lot of booster boxes from throughout the years that you might be like we've just accumulated them." And at this point, I was like, I don't even know how many boxes we have. I don't know where in my house they are. I know they exist, but they're somewhere here, and it might be like literally 50 boxes throughout the years. So
Wow,
it's
that's
somewhere
you're
there.
sitting on a lot of money there.
And so I was like, I should probably go find those and figure out what we want to do with them.
Yeah.
But to your point, I think I'm definitely a hoarder. The problem is I don't know where I put all of these things, and like we've like moved around things at the house that my family lives in, and the house that I grew up
Yep.
in as well. But maybe this is a good excuse to kind of dig through the boxes and see what's around.
Yeah, so last little bit of fun story, and I think it's already kind of long episode, but last weekend I was alternating between watching Victory Road, the Baltimore Regionals, and like cleaning out our attic. So like I just went through a bunch of like boxes of old memories to try and organize them a little bit better. Because yeah, I just, whenever I got something, I would just like stuff it somewhere in a closet, like stuff it in a box somewhere. And now I went through it and rearranged everything. Because I don't know, I felt like, well, summer's over now. I gotta go up there, like drop off some like the beach balls and the like, I don't know, the blankets for the park or whatever. And so I thought it was a good time of the year to kind of, I don't know, clean up a little bit. So I found a lot of cool stuff during that as well.
That's so cool. I like am eager to see like how similar some of the things that we have are, and also how different some of the things are.
Yes.
Just it's throughout all the years. Like there's been so much stuff, and I was like, one day it'd be nice to like properly like store all of this. Like maybe build like a little room or like a case where
Yeah.
you can just like actually display like even all the world's competitor kicks that like I still have them, but they're just like all stuffed in a backpack somewhere like in my
Yeah, yeah,
basement.
yeah.
And I was like, it's just like sitting there in the dark all by itself. And so I was like, maybe one day, but this will be a good opportunity to finally start maybe thinking about that.
Awesome. Was there anything else you wanted to cover with this one?
I think that's it. Regulation H. There's so much we could still talk about, like every individual unique Pokemon, like we saw from the tournament. But overall, I think Baltimore gave us a really good start for where the season will go. But of course, don't extrapolate too much information just from one tournament. I think the
Yep.
main things you should walk away with are here are the top teams. Here are some niche Pokemon and strategies that perform well that should be in my radar, but don't go out of your way to just try to counter them. And if you're playing at a Regulation H tournament, whether it be a local, the global challenge, or the grand challenge, regionals, like I think you should not focus too much on like, oh, like here are all the new strategies. I need to beat all of them. It's more about still
Hmm.
feeling strong about your fundamentals and strategies. I will say, like, if you have a really big weakness into the Porygon 2 or Ursaluna stuff, or a really big weakness to Rain, like those are things that you should absolutely really
Yeah.
be prepared for. But don't worry just because you see one Wheezing Toadscurl team and suddenly be like, oh, now I like have to make sure I have counters to it. So I think that's what I would take away from this first tournament. There's still so much room for creativity and team building, so can't wait to see where the meta develops. And yeah, excited to see you compete in a few weeks, Marcus.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that in the next episode. So until then, go check out Trainers Lounge on all social media platforms, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.
Bye.